Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning in to check out what I presented at Quirks a couple of weeks ago in the Big Apple. With such a sexy title like this, we thought that you might be curious to understand why threesomes are the future when it comes to the world of online qual. And just to set the stage and tell you all up front, I am going to be keeping this presentation PG. Needless to say, I have some very cool stuff to share with you today. So let's get started. I'm Amy, and I recently joined Recollective as Director of Research Services after many years working as a quali on the researcher side. And while I might be a little bit of a newbie when it comes to Recollective, I have a ton of experience running online qual across a variety of different industries. I think I realized very early on in my career that I was passionate about blending sort of qual with tech. And as a previous customer of Recollectives, I also realized how much of a fan I was and still am of the software. I really fell in love with the fact that the platform allowed me to exercise my creativity as a researcher when designing my research because of all of the versatility it offers. And so, fast forward to today, in my current role, I now get to help empower other researchers be more successful when running their online qual projects and help them optimize their design using Recollective. And so, for those of you who aren't familiar, Recollective is a software platform for conducting online qualitative studies and fostering insights communities. Our company was founded in 1998, and we first launched the Recollective platform, which is our flagship product, in 2011. Since then, we've really helped to transform online community based research, and we continue to expand the technology and innovate our platform in response to evolving customer needs and in ways to help really move the industry forward. The platform is scalable to any device, compatible with any operating system, and provides a comprehensive toolkit of features, including asynchronous and live activities, all on one platform. We're available in 25 different languages to help support research initiatives across the globe. All right, so back to the topic at hand and why I'm here to talk to you today about why threesomes are the future when it comes to qual research. And so, what do I really mean when I say all of this? I think, we're all familiar with that traditional approach, which connects researchers with people or their target audience. But what we've seen year over year is this adoption of technology, and not just in our daily lives, that's a given, but also when conducting qual research, which actually makes complete sense given the digital world that we live in, where our devices are quite literally attached to our hands. And it's how we interact on a day to day basis. And so, using tech to conduct our research is a very natural and organic way to engage with our participants. So, when we think about adding tech to the mix, we really want to make sure that it's a seamless integration that's going to empower us to make better connections as researchers, but also to conduct our online qualitative in an elevated way. And so, whether it's getting our projects into field faster, working on a decreased budget, and allowing us to do more research at reduced costs, or even being able to do things that we wouldn't traditionally have been able to have done in person. Technology really is now more than ever part of that ingrained process and really can't be taking a back seat. And so, what we wanted to do today was give you some insight into how other researchers and participants are using our tool to shed some light on some of the trends that we're seeing by pulling some of our user data. And I know I'm a quali, so don't worry, rest assured, I did get some help from my Quanti colleagues on this. All right. So we started with a million Recollective users across the US, Canada, UK, and Europe, which are the primary markets where our researchers conduct the research using our platform. And what we can see here is that a typical study size ranges anywhere from 50 to 150 participants, and that our most popular license sold is 1 week in duration. And so, what this is telling me is that researchers are really capitalizing on the tech's efficiencies and scalability. And so, just to paint a little bit of a better picture, let's compare this to, say, running a traditional focus group where you're doing maybe three markets, okay? Three sessions per market, 6 to 8 participants per session. So that runs you up to a base size of about 50, give or take. So, not dissimilar to what you might be seeing here on the lower end of the spectrum. But the time that it would take to get in and out of field for an in person, multi market project of this nature could run anywhere from 3 to 4 to 6 plus weeks, depending on where those markets are. And so if you compare that to what you're seeing here in terms of that 1 week duration, it really does show you that you can get those larger base sizes in a fraction of the time. And it is what we are seeing researchers do on our platform today. All right, so if we move along to engagement, what we can see here is that a typical study is designed with 5 to 6 asynchronous activities. And we can also see that participants are visiting their study an average of 5 to 6 times. And so the fact that these numbers are quite literally exactly the same suggests that the researchers are setting up their studies with that activity per day mentality, where, participants are told to log in at the beginning of the day, complete their set of activities for the day by midnight, and then come back in the next day, do it all over again for however long the study duration is. So much more scheduled. But what we're seeing more and more is that researchers are starting to shift away from this type of design. And they're leaving the activities open at the beginning of the study. They open them up and they leave them open for the duration of the study to allow for greater flexibility and convenience for participants. The result being better participant insights because they have that time to dedicate to their responses and they can move on at their own pace. And so we all understand how life gets busy, and we really do need to consider designing our studies in a way to get optimal results. And so doing this a bit differently might be something to consider for your next online project. All right. So how are participants accessing our study? What we can see is that 45% are accessing via mobile and 55% are actually accessing via desktop. And this was such an interesting insight for me because in the past, from my experience, there's always been this trend that stressed the importance of mobile. What is this going to look like on mobile? How will participants access it via mobile? Can they do this on mobile? And while I'm not saying that mobile isn't an important part of the design, I do think that we need to understand that people are still accessing studies via their desktop. And so perhaps desktop in the past may have been underestimated, but I think now more than ever, more people are working from home, they're working remotely, and they're multitasking throughout their day on their desktops. And so, as researchers, it's incredibly important that we design the studies for both to allow for that flexibility and that accessibility across devices. If we don't consider those two designs, we might be doing ourselves a disservice. All right. So we've looked at these studies and what they comprise of in terms of number of participants and duration. We've looked at engagement. We've looked at accessibility. So what do these studies actually include? And I love this list on the right because it tells me that researchers are using a variety of different task types that stretch across quant, hybrid, discussion topics. And 1 in 4 actually are including a live video component. And so this is really refreshing to see because researchers are designing engaging studies for their participants by making use of all these different task types that Recollective has. I think they're really trying to avoid that monotony that we've seen in the past when it comes to sort of more Q&A, bulletin board style. Research technology has come so far since then, and so it's really refreshing to see this mix on the right. There are a few things, however, that I did want to point out with this list. To me, it makes complete sense that those standard qual type questions are being utilized the most in a typical study. I think it's what researchers feel most comfortable with. I do think these are very powerful tasks because they offer rich output, bring a lot of color to your reports. But I think that there are a few task types here that are being underutilized and that are potentially missed opportunities. One of those being those quant type questions, right? So polls, grids, sort, and ranks. If you think about scaling to those larger base sizes, those quant tools and their outputs, so think charts and graphs and tables, they can really help the researcher spot themes quicker when it comes to that analysis process. And then the other tool that I think is being underutilized a bit here are those discussion topics. The discussion task adds diversity of responses because it is a socialized tool. So it can help keep those engagement levels high by allowing participants to interact with each other. So, all this to say, I think the wonderful thing about doing your research online is that you have that opportunity to create those activities where you're getting a one on one perspective with some of those more standard type questions. Then you can dive into a group discussion on the same topic. and perhaps get a different lens because you're looking at it from a more collaborative perspective. And this is all done on one platform. Okay. So we just talked about all those different task types. And one of the biggest things that researchers quickly learn when they start doing online qual is the amount of data that actually comes back from the participants. And I can fully attest to this. I remember doing my first project on Recollective and being overwhelmed with all of the data. I wanted to go through it all. It was so rich. And as a quali, I should. But I think it can be quite overwhelming if researchers don't have the proper tech at their disposal. And so, just to give you sort of an idea of what this volume could look like, we pulled some stats here from a study that included 4 to 5 activities. And so, again, when you look at these numbers, think about how much that can multiply if you're adding a sixth, a seventh, an eighth activity. So, just to paint a picture, 300 to 900 qual responses, 100 to 300 plus photos, hundreds of asynchronous video minutes, quant responses, up to 900 hybrid responses, replies for discussions, 6 hours of live video. And just to add to those video hours, actually, we are seeing 80,000 asynchronous minutes per month. And it's a very similar story when we look at those live video minutes. And that has all tripled since the beginning of the pandemic. And sure, it's easy to say, oh, well, this is a direct result of COVID and everyone having to move online. But we look back to the data and we can see that this isn't actually a steady trend. And so when you think about this data volume and you think about that analysis standpoint, you really can begin to imagine how time consuming this can all be. But you can also start to see how technology can play a huge role here and can help you distill this information in a meaningful way and help you do your analysis in a more efficient way. So, if we think about some of those efficiencies when it comes to analysis tools, I can really attest that Recollective does have a robust set of analytical tools that can really help distill this information in an efficient way from things like advanced segmentation, tagging, charts, which are all customizable and report ready. And so, just to give you a little bit of a taste of what some of the analytical tools that some researchers are using, you can see here that each site is actually likely to include 15 segments to help with all that filtering and slicing and dicings of your data. And then when we look at tagging, we can see the breakdown here. And I think there's a few things that I wanted to point out here. So tagging on Recollective is a coding system or an excerpting system where you can highlight any text on the platform and it will, organize it. You can color code it and you can use that for your analysis later on. It makes sense to me here that we're seeing the most tagging being done on those standard type qual questions because we saw a couple of slides ago, those are what the studies most often include in terms of task type. So that makes sense to me in terms of the volume. But I think where there's a missed opportunity are those discussion and live transcripts. I think it's getting a bit better. Definitely something that can be utilized a little bit more, especially when we think about those live transcripts and the amount of volume of video minutes that I just referenced in that previous slide. With Recollective, when you do a live video or a live chat, it all gets automatically generated into a transcript. And then what you can do with the tagging is you can go in and highlight any portion of the transcript you'd like, and it automatically generates a little mini clip of a video. And so the tech really does speed up this process and makes it much more efficient for you on the back end. I think, needless to say, all of this would really be far more cumbersome without the proper tech that has these analytical efficiencies. Okay, so what does all this mean? I think the idea of the threesome is that it really does introduce a new dimension to the research, and it allows us to experiment and design in ways that we might never have been able to have done before, adding a tremendous amount of value to both the researcher and the participant. And so when we think about introducing a third to our twosome, you need to think about certain things. So how can the technology handle scalability and accessibility, right? Can it offer that seamless experience when it comes to accessibility across multiple devices? Can it deal with those larger base sizes? Then, what does the toolkit encourage in terms of those diversity of responses? Does it have tools that are social specifically? Does it have quant questions? Does it have live video? And then thinking about how does it make sense of all of the data in an efficient way to tell that compelling story? So, what are those analysis efficiencies that will help you along your way? And then thinking about it in terms of a seamless integration for all the parties involved and how everything functions together on one seamless platform. When it comes to Recollective, we really are that platform that can offer a fully integrated experience, all done on one platform, really providing researchers with endless possibilities. We have a variety of services available that can help you launch your study successfully, from consulting to guide reviews to programming, getting your participants onboarded. Or you can use our software DIY and make use of our knowledge base articles and how to's if you need a little support along the way. Whichever path you choose, we're really here to help you. And so that's it. I hope you enjoyed my presentation today. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me directly or get in touch with our sales team so they can walk you through all of the wonderful bells and whistles that we have available on our platform. Thanks so much. Bye.